Many thanks, Christina, and thanks very much for that kind introduction. I'm Chris Bennett. I'm the Managing Director of the Caribbean Council, which is a London-based consultancy and membership organisation, which has about 100 companies in membership, both from the Caribbean and from the UK. And we specialise, I guess, in providing a network for those companies to be able to understand opportunities that are in the region, to be able to talk to each other about those opportunities, to potentially form partnerships to work on those opportunities, and to meet potential customers or clients or advisors in the region. We do regular business intelligence type publications. We work with members on a consultancy basis, supporting their market development needs. And we also organise programmes of meetings in London or online with government ministers from the region to understand priorities, and also business leaders from the region to understand the trends that they see. Apologies. I've got a limited amount of time today, so the two things I really wanted to get across to the audience was the fact that please don't overlook the Caribbean and Central America. It's a diverse place, it's a very complex place, and it's often overlooked as companies look for simpler, easier to target markets. But it is substantial when taken in aggregate. 90 million consumers, a GDP estimate of about 600 billion, and importing 212 billion a year in goods and services. And it may not be the countries that you may associate with the Caribbean that are actually where the markets are. If you look at where the largest economies are, they're actually Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and Panama. Now, that's not to say that there aren't plenty of opportunities across the smaller island Caribbean, and of course there are, and I will come on to that in a minute. I've indicated on the presentation here some of the GDP per capita ranges, which show you that these markets are pretty developed, and people do have disposable income. What I think is particularly interesting about the region is that it's full of niches which are not obvious to outside parties. And that means that when you're looking at a new market, it is often not very crowded with competitors, which makes it interesting. Often there are, I mean, regrettably, as both Christinas have alluded to, there are a high level of inequalities across the region. That does mean that there's also a very wealthy elite which has a taste for the good things in life and a disposable income to be able to pay for it. And so that is not necessarily apparent from outside. They also have small numbers of largish firms to partner with, which can make distribution much more straightforward, and also easier to find joint venture partners. We've spoken at length already about the language issues, and generally it's not an issue. I think the business elites across the region either are English speaking themselves or have studied overseas and speak English very well. I think the final point I'd make is that you know, there's a happiness index which ranks countries by their level of happiness, and Central America and the Caribbean consistently comes out on top. And as I look outside my window to see the rain lashing down, that's something that one can easily understand. So I'm going to just talk a bit about the current challenges of COVID and the opportunities that come out of it, and then 4 sectors where I see particular opportunity. I'll just go through those. I've done a relatively long presentation, but I will go through the slides quickly, and the presentation's available if you want to look at it more closely afterwards. As has been alluded to already, COVID has presented some serious challenges for the region, but it's also prompting some rapid adoption of new technological approaches and demand for all sorts of services which weren't there before. So e-commerce solutions are high in demand, contactless solutions are high in demand, the digitization of documents, exchanges of IT solutions, broadband, all of these things are in high demand now. So that there are opportunities there for service providers and products producers in those services. There's also recognition that health systems are teetering on the brink, and some of them need new investment, and there will be opportunities across the piece with that in terms of infrastructure and pharmaceutical demand. And I think there's also a recognition that for the Caribbean, they've been highly aware of this for some time, that they need to diversify away from tourism, because tourism is very vulnerable to external shocks, and this COVID-19 has illustrated that very badly. So I've just highlighted 4 opportunities in the region. What I really wanted to get across was that the region has more to it than just sun and sand and tourism. Tourism is, of course, a very important part of the equation, and I'll talk about the opportunities around that. But first, let me just talk about energy. Energy is a critical issue in the Caribbean. They import nearly all of their fossil fuels, and they're still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. There's been dramatic efforts to switch to LNG and to invest in renewable energy generation, and the opportunities in that area are very substantial, with resources of natural energy across geothermal, solar, wind, hydro, and wave, all identified, and sources of development finance available to help implement those projects. Also on conventional energy, there are some exciting developments now in, as you may well already be aware, in Guyana and Suriname, which are small countries on the northeastern corner of South America, which are, for historic reasons, classed as Caribbean nations. And these have discovered vast reserves of oil and gas. I think the latest estimate was 13.5 billion of reserves in the Guyana-Suriname basin. There are also oil wells being explored or drilled, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, the list is there. So there are lots of opportunities to supply into that sector, and it's definitely a growth sector. And in Guyana, with the successful Exxon discoveries, there will be huge economic growth there, which will lead to all sorts of demand for other services, and is already leading to that demand. I wanted to mention briefly mining. I saw there were several companies on the call who are involved in mining or supplying machinery into mining. There are also substantial opportunities in mining across the region. Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Guyana, Suriname, French Guyana, plus several countries in Central America have got active mining operations in gold, bauxite, limestone, nickel. So you know, those are all sectors to look at. Tourism, very substantial industry for the region. It's contributing 15% of total GDP in 2019. It's massive employer and requires huge inputs, which are largely imported from overseas. So supplies into hotels, food and drink, equipment, beds, linens, all those sorts of things that there are opportunities to supply into. And they're also updating their model. A lot of their product is quite old and needs to be updated, so they're investing into that stock. They're also looking at improving their airlift and inter-island connections, and they're looking at how they can become competitive on price. So they're trying to improve water efficiency, energy efficiency. Again, any products that involve or services that support that will be welcome. The last 2 sectors I wanted to cover. Infrastructure, lots of developments in shipping and ports. The region only functions with active ports and active shipping network, and several countries have emerged as leaders in this field with regional consolidation operations for the big container ships going around the world globally. Some of them are listed there. They are all expanding, they're all investing in infrastructure, they all require services and support in support of that. Airports, likewise, lots of expansion. Central America, there are numerous new airport projects on the cards. A lot of the airports are coming to the end of the runways, and the infrastructure is coming to the end of its natural life and needs upgrades. There are lots and lots of opportunities in that area. Cruise, likewise, at the moment is obviously suffering a step backwards because of COVID, but there is a large external investor who's just raised, I think, 300 million in a bond issue for a new cruise infrastructure port in Bahamas. The industry will be back and will be growing, and there are new ports opening all the time. And finally, I just wanted to touch on climate change resilience and adaptation. Regrettably, as you'll all be aware, the region all too often appears in the news because it's being battered by a hurricane, and on an average year 12 storms pass through the Caribbean, and half of these reach hurricane force winds. And the frequency of these events and the damage they cause is just getting worse. So there are lots of requirements to help protect people, protect their homes, protect their livelihoods, offer insurance products, improve the safety of their homes, and also to ensure that business can get back to usual as quickly as possible after a storm. So those are all areas where there are opportunities for businesses to get involved. I think we've spoken enough about the challenges, and many of them are similar to the rest of Latin America, so I won't go into that. We produce 3 market intelligence publications each week, which I've listed there, and we are available to help with through our membership or through our consultancy services with any market development that you might want to look at across Central America and the Caribbean.